Good afternoon, everyone. I have 2 o'clock, so I say we go ahead and get started. So thank you all for coming to today's webinar, Beyond Borders, Understanding Oldways Heritage Diets and Reducing Health Disparities. My name is Tiffany Chavis, and I am the Outreach and Education Librarian for Region 1 of the NNLM, and Region 1 is located out of the University of Maryland, Baltimore. I will be your moderator for today's session. I'm going to keep my camera off, though, to avoid any complications. We all know how that goes. Just so you know, we are recording today's session. Also, that can take up to 30 days to get edited and be posted up to our website, up to our YouTube page. But we will be sure to send out the link to everyone when the recording is available. Also, I'm going to be putting a link in the chat for the evaluation to get your MLA CE credit. So keep your eyes out for that. All right. Some of you may be familiar with the NNLM, while others may not. So first, let me start off by telling you a little bit about the NNLM. So the NNLM is funded by the National Library of Medicine, which is the world's largest biomedical library. The NNLM is the outreach arm at the National Library of Medicine, and it is a part of the National Institutes of Health, which is the nation's leading research agency. The NNLM has what we call RCs, or regions, offices, and centers, and it's made up of 7 regional medical libraries. University of Maryland, Baltimore is one of them, 4 national information centers, and 3 national offices. All of which provide training, funding, and engagement opportunities to over 9,000 NNLM member organizations. So if you'd like to learn more about the NNLM and how to become a member, you can go to our website, which you probably guessed is nnlm.gov. All right. So let's get into why we're here. Now I want to take the time to introduce to you our guest speaker, Sarah Anderson, who is a Heritage Diets coordinator at the nonprofit Oldways. So Sarah, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Yes, thank you so much for allowing me to join. Let me share my screen here. Just give me a moment. I will do this, and then I will do that. Perfect. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with me, my name is Sarah Anderson. I'm the Heritage Diets Curriculum Manager with Oldways. My focus is on the African Heritage and Health Program and the Latin American Heritage Program. And we're a 501c3 nonprofit located in the Boston area. Thanks again for letting me join. I'm excited to talk about Beyond Borders and understanding Oldways Heritage Diets and reducing health disparities. But before we get started, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I grew up in Houston, Texas, and, continued my education out in Boston, out in the New England area, and that's how I was introduced to Oldways. And as far as, the career path that led me down food and nutrition, it's extremely serendipitous. My major was in global studies. And so I really liked to focus on that nexus between the passion of food, culture, and traditions. And so Oldways really pairs that together. I think through food, we can learn about landscape, society, and language, and understand a way of connecting with others. And so in that way, I feel like Oldways found me. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Oldways for those of you who are unfamiliar with the nonprofit. Oldways is dedicated to improving public health by inspiring individuals and organizations to embrace the healthy and sustainable joys of old ways eating. We have heritage-based diets that are high in taste, nourishment, sustainability, and joy. And we're most well known for creating our Mediterranean diet. And so I'll talk more about that in some later slides. And just follow some of the programs that we're a part of. In regards to our heritage diets, we have our African heritage, our Latin American heritage, our Mediterranean, our Asian, our vegan and vegetarian. Ooh. And then we also, within our African and our Latin American heritage diets, we offer community cooking classes. We also have our plant forward plates. We offer culinary travel. So if you are a foodie, whether that's in the healthcare field or the nutrition side or, the chef side, or just love food and travel, we offer that. And we are also part of the Whole Grains Council. So those stamps that you'll see at your local grocery store on whole grains products, we are part of that council that gets those approved. And we are part of the Cheese Coalition. So for a small nonprofit, we are mighty and we're always doing so many things, but today we're focusing on our heritage diets. Now, in regards of learning objectives, today what we're going to do is classify some healthful foods from Oldways Heritage Diets, discuss the components of our heritage diets that are plant-based. We'll identify key characteristics of each of the diets that we offer, integrate, relevant foods and flavors that are featured within the diet pyramid, and sort of reframe this nutrition educational programming in a culturally relevant way that is more sustainable, and advise you on our practices, and also in the development of our heritage diets. So just giving you an overview of what we'll be going into. Perfect. So a little more about Oldways. When thinking about traditional dietary patterns, they're most often dismissed as unhealthy, especially for those with diet-related illnesses. However, our heritage diets offer a refreshing perspective, celebrating the healthy eating traditions of diverse communities. It's not about dictating what's a single right way to eat, but rather embracing the rich tapestry of foods and flavors that promote well-being and good health. So what we here at Oldways celebrate is diversity in nutrition. Perfect. So there's this graphic over to the left that'll just give you visuals of each of our heritage diet pyramids, embracing their differences. But a little more about our diet pyramids. Oldways has worked with subject matter experts. Each diet has its own advisory board committee, and they came together to develop the heritage diets that you'll see over the years over to the left. Now, why we chose a pyramid? The pyramid is a way of eating rather than a strict diet. So most of your meals, variety of the foods closest to the bottom of the pyramid are what you would want to focus on. So as you go to the top of the pyramid, the foods at the top should be eaten less frequency or in smaller portions. Within each of our heritage diets pyramids, there's an emphasis on physical activity, because when thinking about the old ways of eating, our ancestors led traditionally active lives. And so it's important to incorporate simple movements throughout the day, walking, jogging, dancing, anything that feels comfortable for you, and an activity that essentially gets the heart going. You'll also see fruits and vegetables that should be featured in all your meals, making up about at least half of your plate. And, when we're thinking about food, you're talking about how it's meant to be shared, and so is good health. So think of your dinner table as a place of healing, a place where, you come along with your family and friends and share beautiful, fresh foods and reinforce, a happy, healthy life. And lastly, when you're thinking about, going to what's available, whether it's your local corner store, check out we invite our community members to check out, the local produce and seeing foods in its natural state and crowding out the processed and packaged convenience goods. So that gives a little bit about our heritage diets. Now we're going to go into the development of how they were created. So our first heritage diet was the Mediterranean diet, and this was in response to the USDA's 1992 dietary pyramid that was criticized for its questionable nutrition scientists. And so Oldways, along with the World Health Organization Collaborating Center at the Harvard School of Public Health, initiated the Public Health Implications of Traditional Diets conferences. And these gatherings were started in 1993, involved experts like Walter Willett and Ansel Keys, leading to the creation of the first Mediterranean diet pyramid. And then beyond theory, we brought doctors to the Mediterranean for medical education. And we also brought cookbook authors and journalists. And this was just to introduce this healthier eating habits to Americans. So that was a part of the beginning of Oldways. And then in 1995, Oldways unveiled the Asian Heritage Diet Pyramid at the International Conference on the Diets of Asia in San Francisco. It was developed with the Cornell China Oxford Project and the Harvard School of Public Health. Our Asian Heritage Pyramid draws inspiration from the rich traditions and religious practices of Asian countries and emphasizes vegetables, strong spices, rice, noodles, seafood, and soy products. Now, for our Latin American Heritage Diet, this was introduced in 1996 at the Latin American Diet Conference in El Paso, Texas. A decade later, in 2005, we gathered at a Latin American Heritage Diet Summit in Mexico City to re-examine the science behind the pyramid. And the graphics were updated and created in 2009 to better showcase the abundance of deliciousness in Latin American foods. And lastly, the African Heritage Diet. So the African Heritage Diet was developed with generous support of the Walmart Foundation. Our African Heritage and Health Advisory Board Committee collaborated and crafted the African Heritage Diet Pyramid, serving as a foundational framework for the A Taste of African Heritage curricula. This 6-week cooking and nutrition program was established in 2011 and centered around nutritious plant-based foods rooted in the diverse African diaspora. The pyramid showcases and was created by and reviewed by Constance Brown Riggs, who is one of our advisory board members, but also more information on our advisory board can be found on our website. Jessica B. Harris was also a part of this advisory board committee. And I remember when it first started, it was piloted out to 15 sites nationwide in 2012. And refined curriculum was officially introduced to the public, promoting health and cultural richness in 2012. So now let's go into the early days of Oldways. This graphic that you'll see over to the left, that's John Gifford. He started Oldways in 1990. And his whole goal with Oldways was to promote traditional foods, their agriculture, their sustainability, their preparations, and their healthfulness. Now, let's talk a little bit more about the Mediterranean diet in the next few slides. So, Oldways has always recognized that cooking and eating cannot be separated from nutrition and health. So, in our early years, we not only arranged the culinary trips, we also invited food writers out so that they can be introduced to the Mediterranean diet. And from the 1990s to the 2000s, that was when we were doing those trips. The Mediterranean diet was recommended for dietary guidelines for America through the USDA Oldways. And then we also, to this day, still continue doing research on the effectiveness of the Mediterranean diet and the health benefits. So just to name a few in connection with the Mediterranean diet, and then I have the sources there at the bottom, but you'll see an improved viral lung function and aging, lower likelihood of chronic issues, reduced risk of mortality. And so there's a lot of benefits that go into the Mediterranean diet. And just for time's sake, we'll move forward, but these slides will be this will be recorded so we can discuss more, and you can always reach out to us. Now, as far as the Mediterranean diet and brain health, this is really interesting. Studies show that the Mediterranean diet is linked to age-related brain shrinkage. So as people age, their brains gradually shrink over time, but certain lifestyle habits may be able to show this loss. In a study of more than 1,000 elderly Scottish adults, researchers found that those most closely following the Mediterranean diet lost significantly less total brain volume over the 3-year period study period and those who didn't eat from the Mediterranean diet. And this study was in 2017. And then another study links the Mediterranean diet with cognitive benefits and less conversion to Alzheimer's. So this was a large study that encompassed nearly 60,000 adults total. And the scientists found that closely following the Mediterranean diet was associated with lower rates of cognitive decline, reduced conversion to Alzheimer's disease, and improvements in cognitive function. And this study was done on Frontiers in Nutrition in 2016. And also another study is the Mediterranean diet may reduce Alzheimer's risk by half. This was done in the States. So researchers studied the relationship between eating patterns and Alzheimer's in 923 retired adults in Chicago over an average of 4.5 years. And essentially what they were able to find was 53% were less likely to develop Alzheimer's dementia than the group from the lowest diet scores, and even those moderately following the diet. And this was done in 2015. And lastly, another study, there are many, many studies done on the Mediterranean diet. So these are just a few that we love to refer, is the Better Brain Structure. This is where researchers analyzed the eating patterns of brain sizes, and this was one done in New York of 674 elderly, average age around 80, without dementia in New York City, and they found that those closely following the med diet had larger brains in regards of total brain volume, gray matter, and white matter, with a effect similar to 5 years of aging of the specific foods studied. Eating around 3 to 5 ounces of fish weekly and keeping meat intake under 3.5 ounces per day. It was also linked with larger brain volumes equivalent to about 3 to 4 years of aging. So there are many benefits in regards of brain health and studies that have been done with the Mediterranean diet. And that's why it's one of the ones we like to feature. Now let's go on and talk about our Asian heritage diet. So in this one, we're going to talk more about the benefits of it, but also guidelines to following the diet, common food threads. So let's move on forward with the Asian heritage diet. Key components that you'll notice a few slides ago from the Asian heritage diet is the base of the pyramid, and the foods features leafy greens, legumes, vegetables, soy foods, whole grains, herbs, and spices. And then on that second tier with the Asian heritage diet, you'll see fish and shellfish, servings at least 2 times per week. And then the third tier on our Asian heritage pyramid, you'll see moderate portions of eggs, poultry, and healthy cooking oils. And then the top tier of the pyramid, you'll see infrequent servings of red meats and sweets. Now, in regards of guidelines for following the Asian heritage diet, and this one is unique. I mean, it can be incorporated in any of the heritage diets, but this is a strong factor that we've noticed within our Asian heritage diets, is the practice of eating mindfully, enjoying your food with gratitude and just being in the present moment, and also listening to those digestive cues. So, maybe having tea with your warm foods for digestion, but also listening to see, on those signals that your body gives you on being hungry or not. Within our Asian heritage diet, we've noticed that vegetables are usually the star of the plate. A lot of the dishes and meals are incorporating fresh vegetables. And we've even noticed, the use of meat as garnish or decorative, where it's a very small, more of a small portion. And that's why we have it closer to the top of the pyramid as far as red meats. And, there's definitely an enjoyment of soy protein, so incorporating like tofu, edamame, and it's just what makes the Asian heritage diet unique. You'll see soups that are broth-based, that helps, with digestion, appetite control, lots of different teas, So, and then, as far as being physically active, there are many different practices, within the Asian continent that is implemented that you'll see in normal society life. So it's something that makes the Asian Heritage Diet very unique in its own way. So now let's talk about some benefits of the Asian Heritage Diets. So for instance, residents of Okinawa, Japan are among the world's longest lived populations. The incidence of heart disease, cancer, obesity is lower in most Asian societies than the West. Vegetarian traditions, whole grain and pulses are staples in Asian heritage diets. Fish is a common protein, even more common than red meat that we've noticed. And it's really interesting because Western dietary shifts contribute to health declines among Asians that you'll notice, including rising rates of diabetes and obesity. Whereas if you're actually going back to the old ways that ancestors ate, these weren't common health illnesses. So moving forward, now we're going to open the conversation to talk about the African Heritage and Health Program. So a little bit about the African Heritage Program. Our African Heritage Diet is a traditional eating model based on the common threads and foodways of African American ancestors. The diet recognizes the distinct flavors and traditions of the 4 major regions of the African diaspora. So you'll notice flavors from West and Central Africa, the American South, the Caribbean Islands, and South America. And what's nice is the core of our African Heritage and Health Program is our 6-week cooking class, which is called Taste of African Heritage. We also have a children's series called A Children's Taste of African Heritage. And the curriculum blends nutrition, cultural history with delicious cooking techniques that celebrate African heritage in communities across the country. The regions highlighted in the African Heritage curriculum are home to significant populations of African descendants of the African diaspora. Enslaved Africans possessed farming knowledge, particularly in growing rice, bean, vegetables, and tubers. And African heritage cuisines reflect the resilience and cultural contributions of the diaspora communities. Our motto for this program is, by reclaiming our heritage, we can reclaim our health. And all recipes and dishes included in this program are 100% plant-based, so you actually won't see meat or dairy. And the diet is a way of eating based on, healthy food traditions of people of African roots. And this healthy way of eating is powerfully nutritious and delicious and naturally celebrates the guidelines that health professionals continue to support today. So now I have a video and I just want to make sure that I shared. Okay, I will just play it and make sure.
This is more than just about food. It really is about shaping people's identity and how they see themselves through their food, how they see their culture being a part of their health solution. The Taste of African Heritage and Health program is for anyone, whether it's been trying to lose weight, improve their health, lacking cooking skills, don't know other creative ways, enhance their meals in their homes. The research really does show that when we eat a more traditional heritage diet, that we improve our health outcomes. And I think that's really the core of what Oldways is about and what it's doing in terms of helping the community. This program now with the Taste of African Heritage and Health.
African Heritage Diet Pyramid was created with a committee of nutrition scientists, experts in culinary history and African American foodways.
It's much easier to do because you can identify with that. I know what greens are, and so I can identify with, eat a lot of this. You can have the brown rice and the millet and the barley. You have all of these healthy whole grains here.
And those kinds of grains, that really is a part of the heritage that needs to be built upon. On top of that, the tubers, the healthy starches from the yams to the sweet potatoes, and then you have the balance of fruits that will come from everything from the tropical fruits like the papayas, the melons, the mangoes, the pineapples, the bananas, plantains, and them serving as really desserts compared to what we traditionally have now.
Once you sort of shift your mindset to looking at your plate as more of a heritage plate, it's going to redefine everything that you can put on there. So when you look at a plate now and you say, that should have some whole grains, or that should have and beans, and my greens, and my vegetables, fruit for dessert.
And it's so empowering. This idea of connecting to your heritage and improving your health through connecting to your heritage.
In the Taste of African Heritage and Health program, we evaluate how the students are going through the process and what lessons that we can learn to improve the program and what it has meant for their life and for their family, and most of all, how they have improved their health.
So my name is Danessa Bowling. I live in Houston. I am actually on my 4th series of the class. I committed myself to do this for a full year. So it was a time of a serious transition for me. And so at this point, I had lost my mom, my grandmother, and my aunt to cancer. It's like, okay, being realistic, I'm overweight, I'm at risk for diabetes, yeah, I'm African American. I just didn't know what to do. I can't control cancer, I can't control heart disease, I can't control diabetes. I can control this. This is my thing I can do. And so I thought, well, I'll do it and I'll teach it and it'll help me. Is in addition to teaching and learning and eating healthy, you get this sense of community with people.
This idea of culture being a part of your medicine. We talk about cultural competency, but we never really see the integration of culture in the form of community programs. And the Taste of African Heritage and Health program does the very thing that the community has been longing for, and why it's being embraced so much more than ever, and why it's so desperately needed.
I believe that this can be the thing that could bring people together, where we could break down some barriers that we never thought could be broken down with food.
The idea of our culture and our community, they both are tied into our cuisine, can be a part of our medicine, our nutrition. That's what this program provides more than ever.
Perfect. So that was just a little overview of what the African Heritage and Health program entails. That was filmed by one of our program ambassadors out in Houston, also one of the advisory board members that helped create the program in the Diet Pyramid. So moving forward to understanding the African diaspora. So some may still wonder, what is the African diaspora? Diaspora means dispersal or scattering of a people or a group of people from their original homeland. Therefore, the African diaspora is defined as the geopolitical areas where people of African descent have resided after involuntary removal from Africa. The African Heritage Diet celebrates the eating patterns, food, and cuisines of the 4 major regions of the African diaspora. So you'll see Africa, Latin America, the Caribbean islands, and the American South. The African diaspora also includes parts of Central America, Canada, Great Britain, Pakistan, India, places where large populations of Black descendants settled post-enslavement. Just as people moved throughout the world to create the African diaspora, so did their foods and foodways. Food, typically in the form of seeds, was transported with enslaved Africans to different parts of the globe. Along with those seeds was the preservation of food traditions through recipes, cooking and storage techniques, and agricultural knowledge. This history is still very much alive with us today in the way that we grow foods, prepare foods, and share foods. And, when thinking about just the connection with European settlers and Europeans in America, there's a rough average of about 12 billion people from Africa that were brought to different parts. So now let's go into, now let's go into our Latin American Heritage Program. Sorry about that. So this is another program that we offer, and I'll just take a deep dive into that, and then we'll go into health benefits of the Heritage Diets. So our Latin American program features the curricula that's called A Taste of Latin American Heritage. It's bilingual, offered in both English and Spanish. For this curriculum, it's a 6-week cooking class series that is also based on healthy plant-based foods across Latin America. The curricula was developed with Oldways in collaboration with a committee of chefs, nutrition scientists, public health experts, all of whom are experts in Latin American health and cuisine. In regards of SNAP Ed, and I'll get to this later, giving a little insight about SNAP Ed, but with this diet, SNAP Ed recognizes the 3 levels of evidence-based approach. So you have your research tested, your practice tested, and the emerging. And as Latin American heritage, although the diet pyramid was created before the African heritage, the curriculum wasn't actually developed until after the African heritage. So we consider it as one of our newer programs. Therefore, the SNAP Ed recognizes it as an emerging approach. And this model of the 6-week cooking class based on the pyramid and the lesson plans does have similarities as far as model and setup to the African heritage. And the African heritage is a research tested approach with results that we'll discuss later. Now, when thinking about exploring the flavors of the Latin American heritage and how we came together to develop this curriculum is, of course, promoting the flavorful foods that reflect the range of culinary traditions of this heritage. And in many parts of Latin America, when we're thinking about certain staple dishes, corn, potatoes, peanuts, and beans that are grown locally. And as far as like our program and the 4 regions that we would like to focus on within this, we have the indigenous peoples, and we're thinking about the Aztecs, the Incas, the Mayans, Native Americans, and also the Spanish, the Portuguese, the continental Africans, which were largely influenced by the Portuguese and Spanish colonization. And as far as our 4 major regions that you'll see recipes and flavors and history of, that includes Mexico, South America, Central America, and the Caribbean. And they each contribute in a way that reflects the Latin American heritage diet. So now let's talk about some evidence-based health results. So results from our Latin American heritage program. It's important, especially when we're talking about diabetes education within the Latin American population, because it is the death rate from diabetes is almost 1.5 times higher than non-Hispanic Americans, white Americans in America. So there's a high death toll related to diabetes. And so, focusing on the plant-based model and, encouraging and it's empowering to learn about your heritage, but also healthy alternatives and way to prepare those meals can really help cut down these unfortunate numbers. So from our program, you'll see that 99% of program participants report that history and heritage are motivators for eating well. And 33% of participants report eating more fruits, 32% report eating more vegetarian meals while participating in the class series. And there's just more statistics over to the right. Now let's talk about some results that we have with the African Heritage Program. So adults of the African Heritage curricula that were included, you'll see 90% of them reported improvement in at least one healthy eating behavior. So within the curricula, we have entrance and exit surveys that we collect. And so those eating behaviors could be, eating more fruits or vegetables or eating more whole grains within their diet. So we have a 90% report improvement on at least one healthy eating behavior. The average systolic blood pressure decreased by 4.65 over the 6-week program. you know, a lot of our participants moved to a lower blood pressure stage, ones that had high blood pressure, and are, you know, were included with the African Heritage Program, the SNAP-Ed library, and also the SNAP-Ed toolkit. And I'll talk more about that at a later slide too. And this was since 2012, but geez, if we redid these numbers now, it's a lot more as far as classes taught nationwide. It's well over 500 at this point. But these are just the numbers we have as of recent. So now let's talk a little bit more into impacts of the numbers of the program. You know, 54% of participants, and this is something unique about our program that I guess, you know, when you're thinking about plant-based, healthy, you know, just taking more control of your diet, you assume that losing weight, but that's not, you know, that's a way to measure the successfulness of the program, but that's not the overall goal. It's about, you know, healthy eating and ways of making good nutrition sustainable within your diet. But these are just positive perks that we've been able to measure from participants, is that 54% of participants lost inches from their waist, 64% of participants lost weight, and 30% report increase in exercise, 32% reported eating more leafy greens and vegetables, 26% increase of home cooking, 33% reported eating more fruits. And these numbers were done in 2021 because that was our 10-year anniversary, and we have a whole full report celebrating the successes of the African Heritage Diet program on our website. But what's really nice is that you know, we were able to get together a lot of data collection to really understand the successes of the program, and that's featured in the journal. So now we can talk about what SNAP-Ed is and, you know, why it's important for the program. So SNAP-Ed stands for Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program Education. It is a federally funded program in the United States that provides nutrition education and obesity prevention services to low-income individuals and families who are eligible for receiving benefits under the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, formerly known as food stamps. SNAP-Ed program typically focuses on promoting healthy eating habits, physical activity, and making healthier food choices on a limited budget. So as referring to our A Taste of African Heritage program, we were, from the entrance and exit surveys, we were able to publish a peer-reviewed study journal in the Journal of Nutrition Education and Behavior. And what was lovely about it is that it confirms the overwhelming benefits of our program. And then also, once we published this academic journal, and this was in collaboration with the University of Minnesota, we were able to use this in our application for the SNAP-Ed toolkit. So in 2022, experts reviewed and scored the African Heritage curricula and determined its inclusion for the SNAP-Ed toolkit as an evidence-based intervention for 2022 and beyond. And so it was added around June/July. And what's nice about this is that there's not a lot of studies done on the African Heritage diet. And I think that's what leads to a lot of misinformation, miscommunication, negative stereotypes. And I think that's one way that we here at Oldways work to combat that, is getting this data collection and getting this information out here, that it not only is it sustainable, but, you know, culturally relevant nutrition education really is effective and works. So what was nice about being included in the SNAP-Ed toolkit is it helped prove the evidence-based effectiveness of the program. And also, as I mentioned earlier, or alluded to earlier, with the Latin heritage, it is emerging, whereas with our African heritage, in connection to the toolkit, it is research tested. So That's our newest news, and this happened during the pandemic, which was lovely. So now, because we were still able to work on things during that time. So now we're going to talk about the African Heritage evidence-based results. And this just goes a little bit more into what our journal focused on. And essentially it was increased consumption of fruits, vegetables, and greens, increased weekly exercise frequency, decreased weight, waist circumference, and blood pressure. And, 98% reported health as a motivator for eating and healthy living. And these findings, just continue to the growing body of research on our programs. So in the notes, you'll be able to find the journal that we have published. Now, as far as, talking about more of the tradition side of it, there's not much, as I've already mentioned, there's not much nutrition research published on the African Heritage Diet compared to the Mediterranean diet and other popular diets. But what we do know is it's extremely promising. So in groundbreaking clinical trial published in 2015, researchers assigned 20 middle-aged African Americans to a traditional African Heritage diet and 20 middle-aged rural South Africans to a typical American diet. And in just 2 short weeks, the African Americans reduced the inflammation of their colons, improved their markers of cancer, and increased the diversity of their healthy gut bacteria. On the other hand, the rural Africans eating of the American diet fared far worse, producing more bile acid while decreasing the diversity of healthy gut bacteria. And these results indicate that an African Heritage diet can promote a healthy digestive tract, and that rapid improvements can come with the change to healthier foods. And in another review published in 2019, the author explained how the diets were historically prominently plant-based in Africa, and elements of that are still seen in some of today's cultural cuisines. So that's great. And also other studies have showed that, making culturally sensitive modifications to diet programs can lead to improvements in blood pressure, weight, and other health parameters, which brings us to our work at Oldways. So this is from 2012, just the partners that we had across the states. There are many more now with our heritage and health programs. I mean, we've got some out in Washington, Oregon, Idaho. So here's just a map and graphic I like to share. So let's talk more about the health benefits of all of our heritage diet programs. So when thinking of heritage as a motivator for health, and this information is interesting. All the recipes, not only in the A Taste of African Heritage program, but also the Latin American Heritage program are 100% plant-based, no meat or dairy. And when talking about, the vegetarian community, studies shows that 8% of Black Americans are vegetarian versus 3% of the general population. I'm not sure when my mouse is moving around. It's got a mind of its own. Next point I want to follow up to, and it could be just time naturally telling me that, but graduates of the program, overwhelmingly report that heritage is a strong motivator for health. So interestingly enough about, the nutritionally balanced diet, not all vegan diets are necessarily healthy. When you're thinking about it, after all, Oreos, potato chips, those are technically vegan. So what is the difference between a healthy vegan diet and an unhealthy vegan diet in order to be nutritionally balanced and complete? It is important for a plant-based diet to have components of these different food groups. So when we're thinking about that, we're thinking of whole grains. Much of the grain kernels, nutrients and flavors are in the bran and the germ of the grain, which is routinely stripped out when grains are processed into white flour. So whole grains are a lot healthier as they have more fiber, protein, and many more levels of essential nutrients. In regards to legumes and beans, they're another important food group. These are mostly concentrated in natural sources of plant-based protein. To make sure that you're getting an adequate source of protein on a plant-based diet, try to have a legume or bean each day. And this is for our vegan and vegetarian audience members. For example, 1 cup of black beans is around 230 calories, 15 grams of protein, 1 gram of fat, and 15 grams of fiber. And nuts and seeds that also contain protein, but not quite as much as legumes. They tend to be more fatty, although healthy fats. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, as we need those essential nutrients, but it's also important to note that a little goes a long way. For instance, a cup of mixed nuts has about 810 calories, 24 grams of protein, 7 grams of fat, and 12 grams of fiber. So the healthy fats are there. And in regards of fruits and vegetables, they're essential in providing vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, and fibers. And according to the dietary guidelines, most adults need about 2 cups of fruit per day, and as well as 2 to 3 cups of vegetables per day. And lastly, I mean, we can't go throughout our heritage diets without, highlighting herbs and spices. When you're thinking about controlling your herbs and spices and cooking, it's not the herb at its natural state, it's the how much sodium you're consuming through this spice or whatnot. And usually when you're looking at your store down the aisle, you'll see different spices and it tells you how much sodium, whereas if you get the pure form of that, you can flavor up your food. So, reason why too much sodium can be a problem is it's a risk of heart disease and stroke. So when you're cooking at home, try seasoning with herbs and spices first, but also take a look at that sodium that's on your herb container. And one thing that we like to recommend is, and this was quoted from one of our ambassadors from the African Heritage Diet program, Claire Richardson, lemon's the new salt. So look for those salt, healthy salt alternatives such as lemons, capers, olives that are all just naturally healthy. So now moving on to a couple of research studies, and I know with time I don't want to go over too much, so I'll skim more over these. This is just from one study that was analyzed as a result of 9 observational studies totaling around 307,000 participants to see how plant-based diets relate to type 2 diabetes. Those most closely following the plant-based diet had a 23% lower rate of developing type 2 diabetes across the study pyramids, when healthy plant-based foods such as whole grains, vegetables were included in the definition of plant-based. And in a large study of 70,000 people in California, the mortality rate of semi-vegetarians and vegetarians was 20% lower than the mortality rate of non-vegetarians. And in another review, research analyzed 49 studies, including more than a dozen randomized controlled trials, and found that the following vegetarian diet is linked with lower total in LDL cholesterol compared to meat-consuming diets. So these are just studies that talk more about the benefits of a plant-based diet and incorporating that into your plate, into your food. So more benefits. You're probably asking, why are we even talking about plant-based diets? Well, there are several benefits to adopting more plant-based diets, and just focusing on the 3 here: the lower risk of diabetes, blood sugar control, or risk of heart disease, longevity. And this is when you're thinking of, premature death, and just many, many more benefits to why we advocate for it within our heritage diets. And so just the importance of cooking traditions for modern health. Cooking connects us to earth, food, our roots, good health, creativity, and each other. So the importance of sharing meals and traditions for modern health is, so that families can eat well and feel well together, kids benefit physically, mentally, and emotionally. Healthy couples are happy couples when, sharing meals together, sitting down to eat. Parents are able to connect with their children at the table. Friends go older together over sharing healthy food practices. And, when you're looking at all these different events with the community, as far as, faith and events like that, it's really a good way to bring people together to get a community senses through this one connection of food. So now we're talking about nutrition program benefits. And so this is just from our Heritage Diets. Students participating in the program benefit more in regards of cultural awareness, nutritional education, life skills, community connection, healthy eating habits, empowerment. And overall, our programs contribute to the holistic development of students by integrating cultural understanding, nutritional education, and practical life skills. So ways that we've implemented our heritage classes with different types of facilities. Here's just a few ways to lift off. We've worked with healthcare centers, universities, SNAP Ed implementing agencies, nonprofits, schools, farms, community gardens, virtual and in-person class. One thing that I like to say is anyone and everyone under the sun has the ability to bring these classes to their area. And what teachers will gain is, food and nutritional education, leadership skills, community engagement, empowerment, confidence, and improvement in presentation skills, and empowerment to help switch the narrative of these heritage-based diets. And, I have here African heritage and Latin American heritage, but you could honestly put in any of the heritage-based diets that you could think of. And just having this, we want to switch that negative stereotype of other people's heritage diets being healthy and unhealthy and fatty. Now, I know we're short on time, so I will not be sharing this video of just some of our testimonials, but I'm sure you that it's available up on our website. And these are just what some of our heritage diet resources look like. And thank you so much for your time. I know we've gone over a little bit and I don't want to take up any more of your time. I really appreciate you having me out here today.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah. Does anyone out there have any questions for us? Or for Sarah, let's say. I see some thank yous coming through. People appreciating your presentation. No questions though. We will provide a copy of the recording when it's available up on our YouTube channel. And on the class page, you could usually find it as well.
Hey,
There's a
Tiffany,
question. Yes.
maybe I was going to point you to a question, but you may have just seen it.
Yeah,
About
is there
cost.
a cost
Yeah.
associated with getting the curriculum?
Yes, there is. So we have it depends on which heritage diet, but yes, there is. But we also have a ton of free resources available on our website.
Okay. Do you mind putting oh, you just did, never mind. Someone, Karen asked, what would a facilitator guide look like? Qualifications?
Yes, so we actually provide complimentary teachers training for the African and the Latin American Heritage Diet programs. So through our website, you would want to each one have their own an-hour webinar that you would watch, and then there's a quiz that you would take. We would review those results and then follow up with your certificate of completion once approved. And essentially that's it. And then we have a ton of resources available for new instructors. Thank you, Rebecca, for searching that.
Yeah, I was just about to say the same thing. Another question we have here is, what about the rise, I'm assuming it's in dietary sensitivities and the use of substitution? So I guess they're asking if you all account for that in your diets.
Oh, absolutely. So, I mean, within our Latin American, for instance, within our Latin American Heritage program, some of those ingredients. They're not hard to find, but it's more of a unique challenge because it really encourages you to go out to the community and find them maybe at your local bodega or go to those local markets to source those spices. And so I think that's what makes the program unique and really interactive as far as being introduced to the Latin American heritage diet. But we do provide alternatives within the curriculum too, for those who may have trouble sourcing ingredients. And that's why we have our pyramid, because it's really, it's less strict. We want to have it as inclusive as possible within our heritage diets. Therefore, if you need a protein, but like I was saying earlier, don't have any legumes, switch to nuts and seeds. There's plenty of protein in there for your diet. So we're very open with recommendations as far as alternatives and ingredients.
Okay. Thank you. At this point, I don't see any other questions. They came in fast and furious, so that's good. So last call for questions. Does anyone else have something that's been on their mind? It doesn't look like it, and I just pasted that evaluation link in the chat again for you all. And Sarah, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to join us and tell us about Oldways and the different heritage diets that you all offer.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Tiffany. It's been really lovely working with you, and just thank you so much for chatting up with me and talking about the different what you guys are looking for. So I hope I can be of any additional assistance for everyone who was able to join today. And if you have any questions, I left my contact in the chat, but this was really exciting, and I love chatting about the programs. I could go on and on and on. So
Yes, I bet you could.
Even though I feel like I talked a lot, this is still condensed.
Yes, absolutely. It is definitely an interesting topic, and you still have more positive feedback coming in through the chat, how it's informative and how others really enjoyed the presentation. And it's somebody's asking for the evaluation link again, but I think that'll do it for us, Sarah. Again, thank you so much again, and thank you to Rebecca as well for popping in to help us out, and for our captioner as well. So